Put the power in your client's hands with RTI's Schedule Manager driver. Schedule Manager allows users to easily create and manage their own automated schedules. No programmer is required. Whether they want music to start during their morning routine, lights to turn on and off randomly while they're away, or the coffee maker to start when they wake up, Schedule Manager makes it simple to automate everyday tasks and customize their environment to fit their lifestyle or workspace. In this lesson, I'll take you into Integration Designer to demonstrate how to create the Schedule Manager interface and build command sequences that your clients can schedule. We'll then explore the Schedule Manager web interface where you can back up schedules and clients can easily rename them. Finally, I'll share resources to help you develop creative and useful schedules for your clients. I opened an existing project that I can use to demonstrate several scheduling examples. I'll also provide a handbook filled with useful scheduling ideas that you can share with your clients. The first step is to add the Schedule Manager driver. I'm going to go to the Add Workspace, and I'm going to select the Driver tab. Now, the Schedule Manager driver will be in the official library. However, at the time of this recording, it hasn't made it to the driver store yet. So I'm going to use the user database, but make sure that you select the official library from the dropdown. Search for Schedule Manager. Once you find your Schedule Manager driver, add it to the global area. Select Next, and here's where you can name your Schedule Manager driver. I suggest leaving the name as Schedule Manager or Set Schedules, something the client can understand. I'm going to make the source name the same name as the driver. Now over here on the right side, you can designate different controllers to control the schedules. I recommend controllers that have a lot of real estate, such as IST10s, iPads, or phones. I'm going to untick the ISR4 since that's not going to create a useful interface for me. Let's add device. Now let's click Close and configure the Schedule Manager. Under the Driver tab, select the Schedule Manager. Select Driver Properties. Now here's where you can designate a number of schedules. I'm going to use a couple of examples from the handbook I provided with this course. So I'm going to set the number of schedules to 3. Note that you can set as many schedules as appear in this dropdown, up to 50 schedules. So I'm going to select 3. Now the port is used to access the web configuration page. This page can be used to back up your schedules in case you replace your processor or something like that, and that will save your schedules in persistent memory. Now you can also rename those schedules, either you or your client. So this web page is useful. Now I recommend leaving the port at 9000. If you do have to change the port, make sure that the HTTP port is used for a port that's not in use, a high number. Now let's name our schedules. I'm going to call the first schedule Morning Routine. The second schedule, Game Day Mode. And the last schedule, I'm going to name Vacation. Now each schedule is going to be useful in my particular lifestyle or your client's lifestyle. So make sure that you educate your client on some of these ideas so that you can easily sell them on RTI and the control system. Now down below, you can customize the way some of these names look in the schedule. For example, if you wanted to change event time or end time or the word offset or earliest time or latest time, you could change that if you want. Now the Schedule Manager is going to provide us with a list, an item list of our schedules. For the ones that are activated, there's a prefix and suffix that you could assign to your schedule. So if you want to do a double asterisk or any other symbol, then you'll be able to look at the item list and understand which schedules are currently enabled, because these schedules can be enabled or disabled at any time by your client. So I'm going to leave the default settings here for you just to give you an idea of what it looks like out of the box. No real configuration required. I'll also leave these customization strings as is so you could see the default view. All right, once you configure the schedules, you're going to go over to the driver events section. Now, these are all the different events that run when a schedule starts and stops. And so some of these are going to be useful for you to create those events for your client so that they can schedule them. Let's start with the morning routine. Now, my morning routine is going to start at 6:30 a.m. on weekdays and end about 7:30 a.m. So I do have to set a start time and end time. Some schedules don't necessarily need an end time. You can make them run unlimitedly or until the client decides to stop them manually. But I'm going to make this schedule have a start time and end time. Now, that's all decided by the client. But what should happen when this schedule starts? Let's pull up the macro window here. The first thing I'm going to do when this schedule starts is that I'm going to turn on my audio distribution system in the kitchen, where the client usually spends most times getting ready in the morning. So I'm going to click on macro steps, and I'm going to bring in a command, and I'm going to select from the list my 8046-100, and I'm going to select my zone group context commands, and I'm going to select a source. Well, let's do zone commands, set source selection. And let's set the kitchen to Sonos. And now the client can enjoy Sonos in the kitchen. If you like, you could also add a master bathroom if they're getting ready there. And you can continue the music where they usually gravitate to in the morning. So we're just going to set the kitchen for now. Now I could also do something like ensure that the volume is adequate for an early morning schedule. So let's set the volume on the kitchen to something a little bit lower. Let's do 40 decibels is fine as a start. So those two can run. Now, when the client goes in the kitchen, which has a television, they want to make sure that the morning news is on. Now they don't have to bother moving their schedule around or anything like that. So I'm going to send a command from their direct TV in the kitchen. First, I'm going to turn on the TV, make sure that TV is on, and I'll send a little bit of a delay. And I'll make sure that that direct TV is on. So I'll select direct TV and select their device state keys, pick their tuner in the kitchen and turn that on. And then I'm going to make sure that their news, whatever news channel they use, is selected. So I'm going to bring in a command, select the direct TV, again from the driver list. And I'm going to look for that set channel or that set channel under channel tuning, direct channel tuning. Now I can do a main channel and a secondary channel, major and secondary, but I'm going to set the channel to 202. We'll pretend that that's the client's favorite channel. Now, if you want to put some delays in between these, you're more than fine to do that, but do it as needed. This is going to run in the background anyway, so the client won't even, this will be scheduled, so it won't even matter. All right, the last thing I want to do, or even the first thing I want to do, is enable the appliance. I want to turn on the appliance module from the lighting system so that the coffee starts brewing. So I'm going to bring in a command, and I'm going to turn on my Lutron lighting appliance module in the kitchen. I'm going to select the switches, and I'm going to select from the list my kitchen appliance module. And I'm going to make sure that that's on. In fact, I'm going to bring that up to the top of the list. So that's the first thing that happens when this schedule starts running. All right, that's good enough for a morning routine. Of course, we're open to whatever the client wants to do. Now, what do we want to do when this schedule ends? Well, let's copy these. Let's hold down the Shift key, select copy, and copy these into schedule end. Now, the first thing I want to do, obviously, when the schedule ends, is make sure I turn off the coffee appliance module, okay? For my Sonos, for my 8046, I'm going to set that to off, and I don't have to worry about volume zone, so I can delete that step. Let's turn off the TV. And now for my direct TV, let's turn that off. And now I can remove the toggle command. So it's easy to cut and paste that command. I don't think I need any real delays here, but I can put brief delays in between some of these commands if I like, just to give it some room to breathe. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Remember, these are automated schedules, so they're going to run in the background. So it's not going to tie up a screen or anything like that. All right, fantastic. So now we know what the morning routine is going to do. We'll go and set the schedules manually ourselves as if we were the client a little later. Now let's move on to game day mode. This one's a lot of fun. Now on Sundays when football is going on, now this schedule is going to be a little different. It's going to have a start time and possibly an end time. That's up to you. Now football runs all days typically, but football happens on one day of the week as opposed to the weekday schedule for our last one. So we're going to have to make sure that this schedule only runs on Sundays. Another thing is, unlike the last schedule, this schedule is going to run only during football season, which is typically September to February. So we have to build this schedule when the client builds it to make sure that those settings are applied. All right, so what do we want to do on game day mode on Sunday starting at 12:45 p.m.? Well, the first thing we want to do is turn on the media room, okay? So that's where the client watches those games. So let's go to the media room here. Let's turn on our TV. Let's power that on, and we'll do a little bit of a brief delay. I'll just do a 2-second delay because it only needs a 2-second delay, but you'll set whatever delay you like. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is make sure my cable box in this room or satellite box is on. So I'm going to go to my DirecTV again, device state keys. This time I'll select the DirecTV in the media room, and I'll make sure that that is indeed on. All right, next up, we're going to make sure that that receiver is on. So I'm going to bring in a command, and we're going to turn on that receiver in the media room. The main zone power. Let's turn that thing on. Main zone on off and turn that on. I'm going to pop that up a little bit. Do that first. And now we're going to switch inputs. So I think with Marantz and Denon, I think you could just switch the inputs to turn it on. So I'll take advantage of that. Instead of turning it on, I'll just set the input source to SAT cable so that the DirecTV can be accessed. All right, so we'll turn on the tuner. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the channel for the football, at least the one the client uses. So again, we're going to bring in a command. We're going to select DirecTV. And from our functions, we're going to go with those direct channel tuning again. And we're going to set that channel to whatever channel they use for football. I'll pretend it's 265. Okay? All right, fantastic. Now, there's one more thing I want to do. I could change the receiver to a special sound mode. That's one thing I can do. So let's do something like that. Let's go and set the receiver to a surround mode that's good for sports. Let's pretend that's Quick 3. But the real thing I want to do here, the really cool effect, is that I want to pop up a logo or put up a background on their user interface. So on their user interface, on their ISR4 in the media room, while they're watching this channel, I want to pop up this background which shows their favorite sports team. Now this background is set to use a flag. So I'm going to set flag 10, which is just like turning on a virtual switch. And that flag is named Game Day. And that will show the pop-up. So let's go in back to the schedule and make sure that that flag is set also in our schedule. So again, I'm going to pull this up a little bit and I'm going to set that flag. So bring in the flag statement, use the set, and set the flag for game day. Now it'll make sure that when the client picks up their ISR4, that they can see their favorite logo on their, at least their satellite box. And when the games are ending, if we want to set an end time, we can get rid of it or give the client a way to, when he powers off the room, to get rid of that. So that's up to us and how it works, or them, and they can decide that anyway. All right, fantastic. Now again, if you do want to set a schedule end for this, maybe at night, maybe 10 o'clock or something like that, you're going to copy this, because that's the easiest way to do it, in my opinion, and select schedule end, paste. And now, first of all, let's turn off our TV. Let's set our Marantz AVR to the standby. So that we're going to have to go up to the standby function. So let's go to main zone on off and turn that off. Let's turn our DirecTV off. And I think that's pretty much all we need, with the exception of clearing our flag so that that sports logo doesn't normally show up on weekdays or any other time where there's no football going on. That's a pretty cool effect. Now let's do one last schedule. Now, this last schedule is going to be more for the peace of mind of the client who like to vacation a lot. So we all know that when we're on vacation, we usually leave a couple of lights on. Sometimes we can set up these elaborate macros to run, but it's a lot of work, and now you have to activate it and remember it and all that stuff. So what we could do is give the client the ability to create a schedule to randomize things going on and off in the house. That way, it looks like the house is occupied while they're on vacation. And the best part about this is that the client can enable this schedule whenever they see fit. So when they go on vacation, they can enable the schedule, which will now start randomizing these lights. So right before they leave. Okay, so let's click Schedule Start. Now, what do we want to randomize? That's up to us. Now, what I like to usually do is randomize things like, let's say, let's do some random TVs turning on. Right? So I'll power on that. I'll power on another TV or something else. Let's just turn on the DirecTV. So I'm going to go to my DirecTV. We'll turn on our receiver so they could hear power. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my DirecTV and I'm going to set some channels. I'm just going to look like the channels are tuning. Okay. So I'm going to go to my DirecTV, direct channel tuning. And now I'm just going to make a couple of these commands. I'm going to scatter them around. And now I'll set this to channel 22. I'll set this to channel 75. And I'll set this to channel 362. And now it looks like the channels are flipping. If you want, you can put delays in here. Okay. So that'll give the illusion that there's something going on in the house. Now, I recommend turning off the Marantz also after a while. You could do a little longer delay if you want, or when you disable this schedule, you don't want it staying on. So you want to make sure you turn it off even after a few minutes or a few hours, just to make sure it's off. Okay, those are just optional. Now, really what I want to do here is I want to randomize lights. So I'm going to bring my command in here, and I'm just going to select my Lutron lighting system, and I'm just going to select my set lighting level commands. Now, you could do this a lot of different ways, but I'm going to go and set different dimmer levels for all my lights. Maybe I'll set my kitchen to 75. Maybe I'll set my foyer chandelier to 35, and so on and so forth. You're just going to keep randomizing lights. Media room ceiling, let's do that at 50, if they could see the media room from the street. Okay? Again, time delays are going to be great here because now these are going to look like they're staggered. I recommend doing a little bit longer than 2 seconds. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want to do. You could even use call macros to delay those as well. So let's show you how to do that. So that's probably a useful command. Instead of putting all of our commands on this, what we could do is stagger them. So how that will work? Well, I can go here. Let me copy this whole thing. In fact, I'm going to hold down my Shift key, copy the whole thing. I'm going to click on Global and click on Macro List. And now I'm going to call this macro list Vacation Mode. Now, the cool thing about these macros is that when we call them from buttons, we can schedule them. So I'm going to paste that in here. So I'm going to schedule this, right? So I can run this at all different times, right? So I'm going to go, I'm going to actually call this vacation mode on. And now I'm going to also add another one. I'm going to copy all this and I'm going to create another one called vacation mode off to kind of do the opposite, because it's going to stagger this stuff on and off, because if it just looks on, it's not as useful as it being on and off and on and off. And I'm going to paste that in and I'm going to just do the inverse. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to turn this off or standby. And then I'm going to set my channel I don't have to worry about. So we can get rid of these. Okay, we keep the delays in. It's okay. And now we can set this to turn that off. And now we can set that to off. And now we can set these lights to 0, 0, 0. All right. So instead of doing this all within our macro, now we can go back to our Schedule Manager driver. And now for our vacation mode, instead of doing all this stuff and then having to do all those delays and everything else, we can delete this. And now we can use the call macro feature. The call macro feature can fire the macro either immediately or delay. Let's delay this one let's do about 2 minutes. So 2 minutes after it randomizes, it'll fire, okay? But let's do the second macro to turn it off. Let's do that. Let's schedule that to turn off in let's go 20 minutes, okay? So now you've got these running in the background and they're staggered. So they're going to randomize this whole thing, turning things on and turning things off over a period of time. So that's going to be really cool. So again, you're going to set it the way you like, okay, or the client likes. So we can do a schedule end also for this, but for this case, I'm going to have the client come home and press vacation off or something that will deactivate the schedule, or when they come home, they'll just disable the schedule in the Schedule Manager interface, which I'll show you next. So that's how you configure Schedule Manager. Now, again, in the handbook, we've got so many examples of things you could do. We've got a coffee break in the office. We've got an office closing procedure, movie night, a bedtime routine, a school pickup reminder, snowbird mode, holiday mode, and several others, restaurants opening and closing. So there's so many different schedules you could do for commercial or residential, depending on what kind of projects you do. So definitely check out that handbook for some ideas, or let us know if you've got your own ideas so you can do that easily. All right, so now that we've set this Schedule Manager driver, let's go to the communications menu and send to our devices. I'll pause the video and we'll show you our iPad in action. Now let's illustrate how clients can create their schedule using their RTI interface. Now again, you're going to want to pick a controller that's got a good enough real estate. Again, iPads, iPhones, Android phones and tablets, and IST10s are a great option for a schedule because they're easy to configure and see. Now, when the client opens up their system and then launches Schedule Manager, either from the menu or from a button, they're going to see this by default. Now, on the left side is their list of schedules. Here you could see their morning routine, game day, and vacation. And they could select any of these schedules and notice how the schedule changes in this window. So I'm selecting different schedules, and now I'm allowed to configure the one I'm selecting. Now let's start with our morning routine. Now the first thing I'm going to do is select the start time. Now there's different start times. Let's scroll by using the select mode buttons and scroll through the different start times. There's fixed time, sunrise, which you could offset by a certain amount of minutes or hours using the up and down buttons for hours and minutes. Sunset, that works the same way. These are great for when you want to turn on lights at sunrise, sunset, or if you wanted to do something specific at sunrise. These are great to do. Another example is random. So we can set a random time. And now we can even select in the earliest time and the latest time to do that. That way we're not turning on lights during the day, or at least not turning on lights when we don't want to. Now, again, there's none, but we're going to do it for our morning routine, a fixed time. Now, what time is our morning routine? That's up to the client. I'm going to set this to, let's do 6, and this is 24-hour time. So let's do 6:30. There we go. Now, once you're done with the fixed time, the start time, you're ready to move on to days, which is the next function on your interface. So let's select what days of the week do we want this to happen. Now, the client wants this to happen, and there's different days of the week. There's once only, daily, weekdays, weekends, or weekly custom. You can select the days you want as you will. But I'm going to go with weekdays because that's when the client wakes up for work. And while people have different work schedules, you can set accordingly. Okay? So now I'm set to weekdays. Now I'm going to move on to months. What months do I want to do this? Right now, by default, all the months are selected. I could uncheck a month. Maybe I'm not here. Maybe I go away on vacation in August. So I can uncheck that if I want, or any months I want. However, this is going to go all year round. Okay, so I could leave this as is. And of course, end time. If you want to choose an end time, which of course might not be necessary in some cases, you can set an end time. So let's go and select an end time. I'm going to do the fixed time again, and I'm going to do this time ended at 7:30 a.m. So it'll run about an hour, the schedule, before it ends, which is perfect for me because let's say the client leaves at 7:30 a.m. for work. Again, this is a 24-hour clock. There's no AM and PM, so it makes it a lot easier to have to, avoiding mistakes and stuff like that. Okay, my schedule is set. Now, I do want to save my schedule. Now, watch what happens when I click Save. Hourglass pops up, and now my schedule is saved. Now, I'm going to enable my schedule by clicking this toggle, and now my schedule is enabled. And now you can see my morning routine that has those characters, and you can control those characters in the driver. Asterisks, parentheses. This is right arrow and left arrow, that's fine, but you can control that. So our schedule now is enabled, and we can tell that it's enabled because of those arrows. Fantastic. Now, at any time that we want, we could click Erase to erase our schedule or disable our schedule. Okay? Disabling the schedule is pretty simple. You disable it. Okay? But we'll keep this enabled and move on to our next schedule. Let's click Game Day Mode. So now, Game Day Mode is a little different. Game Day Mode starts at a different time only on a Sunday, but only at a start time that I set and only on certain months. So let's get this configured. What time do we want to start? Well, that's going to be the fixed time. Let's pretend we want to start this schedule at 12:45 p.m. So I'm going to go and select 12. It's already set to 12, so I'm going to change that. I could probably go down easier. Let's change this to 12:45. Great. So now our schedule can be 12:45, and that's fine, and that's PM. Now let's move on to what days of the week we want. So let's go through this. Do we want it once only? So let's go through daily, weekdays, weekends, or custom might be the better option. Let's select Sunday, which is the only day we want this to run. Now, technically, the client might do a different schedule for Monday Night Football if they're into football or something like that. So you could have more than one schedule, of course, that does the same thing. Or does the same routine at a different time. So, okay, now what months do we want this to run in? Well, football doesn't really go on in January unless I'm watching the Super Bowl or something. So let's just select the months that football usually does. So January, leave January. So let's uncheck the months that football typically don't go in. So September, October, November, December, January, February. Let's get rid of March, April, May, June, July, and we'll just get rid of August, even though sometimes we might want to watch that preseason game. And there we go. Okay? Now, what time do we want this to end? Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. The client can end the schedule by either disabling it or he can you have a button on the screen that launches a way to disable this schedule, or you can create an arbitrary end time to keep them out of trouble, okay? So it doesn't matter what time the end time is because really they could turn off the TV and the streamer anytime they want. But the team logo, well, that's something you might want to clear if you shut off the TV. But we'll just make sure that that logo is cleared at a certain fixed time. So let's set a fixed time, and then we're going to do 10:45 p.m. So again, we want to go to our fixed time and end this at 22:45. So that's minutes. So let's leave that. Let's move the hours up to 22, and we want 45. So let's go down to 45. Good enough. Let's save our schedule, and now let's enable it. Give it a few seconds to fill in, and there we go. There's our save schedule. Next up, in our last schedule, at least for this course, is vacation. So let's select vacation mode. Now, with the start time, we don't want to set a fixed time this time, or we don't want to offset sunrise or sunset. So we're going to select a random time. Now, it's up to you what time your random time is. I'll pretend our random time is at, I'll do 1400, okay? And our latest time, well, let's do midnight or like 1 a.m. So let's do 1 a.m., okay? So that might be a good time to start doing those random selections. Now, the days of the week, those can be once only or daily. Let's keep it daily because we're away on vacation and we're going to come back and disable this thing, but we want to make sure that this is running no matter what days of the week happen. And now let's move on to months. So, well, let's leave that. Move on to months. All months is probably the best idea. And then end time, let's let this one fly because I don't know if I want to stop randomizing, but if you did, you could just set this to a fixed time. So let's say you want to stop randomizing at a certain time, you can set that. But we did do an earliest and latest time on our settings, so we don't have to worry about this field so much, okay? So you could leave it as such and move on, okay? All right, so that's going to be an open-ended schedule. Let's save it and enable that, or we don't have to enable it. The client can now enable it as they wish. So that's how they configure schedules using the controller interface. Now, this controller interface is going to be automatically programmed for you. So if you go back to Integration Designer and you look at your Schedule Manager interface, these interfaces are automatically going to be. So what that means is that if you wanted to create this by custom, you could just reverse all the little layers we have. And these layers pop up when you select different schedule modes. And you can easily reverse engineer this by looking at the layers that pop up. You have your default interface. And of course, when you select days of the week, you could scroll through these options, months, and so on and so forth. And each of these layers has a visible state that you can emulate on your custom interfaces. And there's lots of custom interfaces already out there that have been programmed with Schedule Manager. So it'll take you a little bit of time, but you could use either the Coral or Elegance canned interface. Okay, now what else can you do with Schedule Manager Driver? Well, you can go and access the web GUI on that web interface that I spoke about earlier by the processor IP address and that port set in the driver settings. Let's do that now. So I'm going to open up a web browser and I'm going to type in http:// the IP address of the processor. So mine is 2796:9000. Now again, you can change that port. We don't advise it unless you have good port management knowledge and you know what ports are in use and which port to use. Make sure that port is communicating. And now when I hit enter, it's going to take me to the Schedule Manager interface. Now, you can back up your schedules. You might go through a lot of work making those schedules. Your client at least may, go through a lot of work of making those schedules. So what you could do is create a backup of those schedules. Now, this will create a file, schedmanager.back, And now if I save this to a local directory, this can be restored at any time by choosing that file and restoring it. Okay? Now this will save the schedule in persistent memory. So pretty cool there. You could erase all schedules. And then my favorite one is that you can go in, if you're your client, and you can go and rename your schedules. So if they want to change game day mode to football Sunday, pretty easy to do. All they have to do is click Save Names, and that will reflect in Integration Designer as well. So that's the Schedule Manager driver. Again, we have a handbook that lists out all different types of schedule ideas that you can deploy. Of course, there's many different ideas that you might come with yourself or your client might have that they can do. So just set up the events to run and the client can schedule it. That's our Schedule Manager driver. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week on our next video.